Hello and welcome. My name is Ben Brown, and I appreciate you joining us today for this webinar regarding the 2024 federal commodity programs. It is a pleasure to be joined today by Rebecca Malter from the Missouri Farm Service Agency of the United States Department of Agriculture. You will hear from Rebecca in just a few minutes, and we certainly do appreciate her taking the time to be with us. I have a few housekeeping items before we begin today with the content part of our program. The first thing is, as always, we will have questions at the end of today's program. We encourage you to submit as many questions as you would like, either by name or by using the anonymous function that you see at the bottom of your screen. Questions can be submitted at any time. We will try to get to as many as we can today. However, if we do not get to all of them, we will make sure to answer those and post those to the conference website. Speaking of websites, the location for the website can be found at the link that you see there by going to fapri.edu or .missouri.edu under the events tab, and then 2023 Agriculture Lender Seminars. We recognize that this is 2024, but this is part of our 2023-2024 Ag Lender programs. So you will find information today about today's program, including slides, eventually recording after the program. You'll also find information there from our past presentation on the U.S. and agriculture trade. I have three asks of you today. I ask that you be engaged in the presentations by following along and asking questions. I ask that you share this information with others in the food and agricultural industry. And I ask that you fill out our evaluation at the conclusion of today's program. These evaluations are important to us as they help us identify whether we met our program goals that you see listed on your slides, identify topics for future programming like this, and then also to use to help get program support dollars to continue to offer programs like this. The evaluation is anonymous and it's internet-based. It will launch in your internet browser after you exit the webinar. If you know you'll have to leave early, please budget 3 to 5 minutes to complete this survey. There's about 10 to 12 questions there to answer. As a reminder, this is our second webinar in our spring educational webinar series planned for our stakeholders of the College of Food, Agriculture, or Natural Resources. Topics this year include topics like trade, weather conditions, commodity markets, policy issues, crop insurance, input cost markets, and more. We've already had one. Today's the second. We've got 3 more planned. We encourage you to hold these dates to enhance your farm management skills and those of your clients or stakeholders ahead of the 2024 season. And again, if you missed the first webinar on agriculture trade, it can be found at the same FAPRI website that we just shared a few moments ago. So we're going to start out with a poll question here. As some of you might remember from our last webinar, I like polls, and so we're going to do a poll. This poll basically asks, when do you think Congress will pass the Farm Bill? And you've got a couple of options there. This spring, basically before June, this summer, early fall, this year after the election, in 2025, and then maybe never. Now, in full disclosure, maybe never is unlikely, right? I imagine that we will eventually pass something, but I threw it in there. If you're feeling a little squirrely, you might choose that answer. So I'll give you just a few moments so we can record answers, and then we'll move on to our program. All right, looks like we're there. I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So we had 80% of our audience participate in this poll. The answer most likely from our participants was 63% for in 2025. And that is notable because we're going to talk here in just a few moments about the timing of this year's Farm Bill. When it expires in 2025 would require at least one more extension, which I certainly think is possible. So that is a notable answer by our audience today. We're going to do one more here real quick. So this one asks, based on what you know now, as of today, the current safety net for agriculture commodities, and again, we can take this as row crops or livestock, provides adequate coverage. Okay, so we're just asking about the whole safety net, not breaking out into specific commodities. This would include crop insurance and stuff like that. So just want to kind of get a pulse for the audience. We'll share those here in just a few seconds as well. All right, I think we're just about there. Any last people out there? All right, we're gonna go ahead and share the results. This one, 42% responded indifferent, unsure, and then adequate support and not adequate support, uh, about the same, about a third. So also kind of an interesting result. Hopefully we can help provide some clarification on what's included in Farm Bill programs today. And then also talk about what it looks like for the outlook for 2024. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. We'll come back. We got a couple more polls planned for later in the webinar. I'm going to kick us off today and just kind of set the stage a little bit. And then, as I mentioned, Rebecca Malter will be joining me in just a few moments. I want to talk a little bit about just general policy structure. So there are, in general, three ways that that we can receive program support through federal farm policy, and they include supply control measures, which for those of you that remember, the prior to the 1996 Farm Bill, this was something that was kind of popular. I always tell my students when I'm teaching farm management at Mizzou, if you're driving along I-70 in Kansas City, right north of where the Royals Stadium and Arrowhead Stadium is, there's some caves there. Those caves used to store government cheese, and that was a supply type control product. But basically, the general idea was that the government was storing product. They would buy when prices were low to help bring up prices, and then they would sell back into the market when prices got high. And that was kind of as a way to stabilize the product. The 1996 Farm Bill kind of did away with some of that, and along with WTO measures. However, we do still have some examples of supply control measures still today. The Conservation Reserve Program, in a lot of ways, is a supply control measurement, in that it's taking land out of production in the name of conservation or highly erodible land, and bringing that in. We still have marketing allotments in some cases, in some very specific cases. We do have some marketing allotments as well. So there are still some examples of this. The second way that oops, excuse me, I hit the wrong button there. The second and third way is probably along our more traditional ways of providing government support, or at least support for agriculture producers. It includes price support measures that we saw kind of during the trade spat with China back in 2018, 2019, increases to the national loan rates. When we see those happening, basically producers can take out a marketing loan. It establishes a price floor under their product. We can talk more about that throughout the webinar as well. And then the third one is income support measures, which look very similar, and a lot of our current programs fit into this bucket of it's not tied to a specific crop. It provides a transfer of payments that either prices get too low or revenues get too low. So again, three ways that the federal government can support to producers, those three ways. Just a reminder of kind of what we're talking about when we talk about Farm Bill based programs. You'll see here in this graph, the black line is our commodity title program. Those are your agriculture risk coverage programs, your price loss coverage programs, your marketing loan assistance programs. Those are all in the black line. The yellow there is crop insurance benefits. So again, we have a whole webinar coming up on crop insurance in a couple of weeks, but that's that gold bar. The blue there is conservation. So this would include CRP. This would include EQIP and CSP programs that would be included in the blue. And then the green is what we've been calling ad hoc or disaster aid programs. This would include the market facilitation payments that producers received in 2019 as a result of the trade spat with China. This would include the the CFAP payments, the coronavirus food assistance protection payments due to COVID. This would also include some paycheck protection program payments. My point that I want to make here is, as you can see, over the last couple of years, government payments, and it's been hitting the news a lot, have been extremely high, but it's been coming from those ad hoc payments that are not guaranteed in any given year. And so we've seen some strong payments, but we don't anticipate those to continue moving forward. And as a result, you can see kind of what the other program support programs look like that we expect here at FAPRI through 2025. Now, these are national numbers aggregated together. I would assume that we're going to see a little bit stronger of payments for agricultural risk protection or agricultural risk coverage or ARC County payments here in 2024 due to the 2023 crop. There were several counties around the state that had very dry conditions, very poor yields. I think those are going to trigger some agricultural risk coverage payments in 2024 from the 2023 crop. That'll look a little different than these national numbers that I'm showing you right here. So a common question that we get asked is, now that we're getting ready for Farm Bill sign up again, the question always comes, didn't we just do this? And the answer is yes. The 2014 Farm Bill was the first year to really give producers a choice between agricultural risk coverage and price loss coverage. That was a 5-year sign up. Producers signed up once at the beginning of the Farm Bill, and that decision lasted through the remainder of the bill. Starting in the 2018 Farm Bill, producers were given a choice between the two, and they could enroll every year if they want. They could change their decisions and re-elect every year. And so that's kind of where we're at. The 2018 Farm Bill was set to expire, or did expire, last September 30th. So at the end of the fiscal year, it did expire. Congress did not pass a new federal farm bill. And so in November, they came through and they gave a 1-year extension to the Farm Bill. So for 2024, program year 2024, which ends at the fiscal close on September 30th of 2025, we are operating under the same programs and the same rules and provisions that we did under the 2018 Farm Bill, extended 1 year. Producers do not have to amend their decisions. You can keep your decision the same if you want, but you do have to elect every year. You do have to go in and, enroll and sign a piece of paper and say, yes, I want to participate in the program. Make sure that you meet the qualifications, including highly erodible land. And so you do not have to change your election every year, but you do have to enroll. There's also a question about, well, what about landowners? Well, landowners come into play if they hold a risk in the crop. So namely, if they are a crop share tenant, or crop share landowner, meaning that they get a portion of the crop, then they can participate in the program for the percent of the crop that they receive. If they are under a cash rent agreement to where the tenant pays the landowner a cash rent to crop the acreage, then they don't really have risk in that crop. They don't enroll or elect in ARC County MPLC. So that's how this plays in for owners, is if they have a risk share of the crop, then they can participate. Want to make a couple of comments about the 2024, 2025. You all told me it was going to be 2025. I think I would generally kind of agree with you, is that it's going to be hard to get things done this year, given that we have a budget debate still happening, and they've made March kind of a target for passing some federal budget bills. That's going to absorb some of the oxygen for a farm bill. And we're going to quickly get into what we call election season, which you might be sitting there saying, we're already in election season. Well, for Congress people, especially around April and May, that's when election season really starts going. So a couple of things. One, the starting point for the overall budget still hasn't been determined. We do not know if this bill is going to cost more money or less money or be budget neutral. That's kind of a big deal when you're thinking about federal farm policy, and that has yet to be determined. There's a big debate across allocation of titles. So for those of you involved in the agriculture sector, it is pretty widely known across the communities that nutrition now makes up the majority, about 80% of the farm bill. And every year there's a effort and a push to take funds out of the nutrition program and reallocate them to some of the other titles in the farm bill, namely crop insurance and commodities, conservation, stuff like that. This bill also has, or this time the budget debate also has an interest in the conservation title, of moving funds out of the conservation title into the commodity support and strengthen that commodity support title as well. So we haven't figured out the overall budget. We don't know the budgets by title. There's also some debates within the title. So for the commodity title, and we'll talk about reference prices more in detail here in just a few moments, but the reference prices, not the effective reference prices, but the reference prices for corn, soybeans, and wheat are set at $3.70, $8.40, and for wheat, $5.50. Of course, there's reference prices for all the other commodities as well, but as you can probably guess, these are set relatively low to where our market prices have been. Many people would suggest that these prices are well below break-even price, and that there's quite a bit of financial deterioration happening on farms before reference prices are hit. Again, we have effective reference prices that are a little higher than this, but a lot of the debate has been centered around, can we raise these reference prices? It costs money to do so. And so that's where the debate of where can we pull money from other parts of the bill to do that, if that is something Congress wants to do. There's also this discussion between nutrition and crop insurance as it relates to qualification standards for nutrition title programs. This is largely characterized by work requirements. So how much do you have to work or be actively looking for a job to qualify um, for nutrition assistance. On the crop insurance side, this largely comes down to compliance. And should producers, and should being a value judgment, but this is always the argument, should producers be required to have conservation plans or enhanced conservation plans to be able to qualify for crop insurance? Currently, they do not, but this is always a big push, and we're seeing that debate spark up again this year. Also, payment limitations. Senator Grassley of Iowa has always been a champion or pushed payment limitations, setting a limit for farms. Anything over that amount would not be paid out to the farm, and we will likely have that debate again this year. And so those have yet to be determined. And then finally, like I mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed almost a year and a half ago now, August of 2022, provided historic amount of funding for conservation programs. There's an interest in using some of that money to shore up other areas of the Farm Bill, but again, that is a source of debate as well. So I put all this in here to say that there is a lot of sticking points that have to be worked out before this Farm Bill can reach the end of the line. I think it's going to be hard to do it this year, and so we'll see. The other thing I want to end with here before we move on, I've got 2 points I want to make before we move on to our guest speaker today and talk more specifically about Farm Bill enrollment. I do this activity with a broad scope, a representative population of Missouri. This is not countrywide. This is just Missouri. And I ask people across the spectrum, whether they're involved in agriculture or not, to basically allocate M&Ms into different titles of the Farm Bill. And they're given 5 choices: nutrition, crop insurance, conservation, commodity programs, and then all other titles in the Farm Bill. And they're asked to assign M&Ms representing dollar values as to where they think the money should go. If they were legislators, where would they allocate money? And the first column that you see there is the actual budget from 2018 to 2021. The second column that you see there is the initial allocation without description. So I basically just say, here's your 5 choices, allocate these M&Ms however you please. And you can see how the general population allocated their money. Conservation, for instance, received a 228% increase relative to what the actual outlays have been. Commodity programs receive 114% increase relative to what actual allocation has been, and so on. So you see there just no information whatsoever how people assign the M&Ms. After giving them a sheet telling them what each program and what each title does and what's included in each title, they're asked to then reallocate again. And in this case, you can see that support for commodity programs still increases from 7 to 9%, but not all the way up to 15% like what you saw in the initial allocation without information. Crop insurance actually decreases. So once people are given information about the programs, support for crop insurance decreases by about 50%. Conservation programs still up 228%. The other titles, instead of being up tenfold, are now only up double, or up 100%. So this speaks to the difficulty of assigning dollars for Farm Bill programs across all the titles, and kind of how some of the general population views the different titles and how they work, right? So this is my point here, is the difficulty of making adjustments and improvements to the commodity title without additional funding. If you have to take from somewhere else, it becomes very hard. Of course, the reason people want to find money to shore up the commodity title can really be summarized here in soybeans. What I'm showing you here is, in the black line, the marketing year average price for soybeans. This is that cash price that farmers receive across the country. The red line there is the PLC reference price. We were talking about those earlier. If markets fall below that reference price, a payment is made. The effective reference price is a little bit higher. It's allowed to move a little bit higher. And then, of course, you see the agricultural risk coverage reference price or benchmark price in there as well. I show you this to say that for soybeans, in the entire history from the 2014 Farm Bill, soybeans have never paid out on the price loss coverage program. Many people see that as being inadequate for the soybean industry. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just saying that this is part of the discussion of finding more money to increase that reference price from like $8.40 up to $9.50 or something like that, right? And this is one of those challenges of reallocating money across the Farm Bill. So we'll talk more about this. But we want to launch another poll, and we're going to get ready for our speaker today. I'm going to launch this poll is to test your knowledge about the different Farm Bill programs. So I'm going to ask you, when do producers and landowners need to enroll in commodity-based programs through the Farm Service Agency? You've got 4 dates there: February 29th, March 15th, March 31st, and April 15th of 2024. So a couple answers here, and then we'll move on. All right, I think we're getting pretty close. Last call for anybody left. All right, so I'm going to share results. The majority of you correctly answered March 15th, 2024. 55% of you got that correct. That is the right answer. The nice thing about enrollment for federal commodity programs is now the same date that many producers enroll for crop insurance. March 15th is also the deadline for crop insurance. So I'm going to stop sharing that. We've got one more to test your knowledge here. So this question relates to payment dates. So the question reads, if payments are triggered or if the safety net is triggered for 2024 program year, so the crop that's going to be grown this summer, when are payments made? And you've got 4 options there of October of this year, March of next year, May of next year, or October of next year as well. And a little fun fact, I teach the farm management class here at the University of Missouri. This actually was a question on their final last semester. So you all are getting a college test question today. All right, it looks like we're done. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And this is why we do this. This is why we do these webinars. So the majority of you answered May 2025. That is actually the marketing year for program year 2024 is still happening. So we don't know that ended price until August of 2025. And so the correct answer is somewhere after around October of 2025 is when payments are made for that. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. So as I mentioned, I am pleased to be joined by Rebecca Malter. She is currently one of the safety net program specialists for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Farm Service Agency here at the Missouri State Office in Columbia. Rebecca provides guidance to Missouri's over 300 employees on program policy on a variety of programs and operations, including the Agriculture Risk Coverage Program, Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program, and customer role management. She has served in this capacity since September of 2020. She began her career with the Farm Service Agency in 2008 as a program technician in the Saline County office, where she was responsible for the delivery of the Conservation Reserve Program, ARC and PLC, and many other programs at the local level. She earned a bachelor's degree of arts a bachelor's of arts degree in management from Central Methodist University. And her husband Justin live in Malter, Missouri, where they have a diversified row crop and cow-calf operation along with their children, Tate and Molly. Rebecca and Justin are 4th and 5th generation farmers in Saline County. Her hobbies include following her children in all activities, which include basketball, track, 4-H, FFA, and showing pigs and cattle. So with that, Rebecca, I will turn it over to you if you're able to join us. Yep, there we go. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you for having me. Excuse me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be a very basic of ARC PLC. Hold on, I can't get there we go. Just a quick breakdown. Like he Ben said earlier, the 2024 ARC PLC program is an extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. It offers two programs, the Agricultural Risk Program, ARC, and Price Loss Coverage with PLC program. We're going to talk about covered commodities a lot, and I just wanted to give you a brief little chart to show you the 22 covered commodities that are covered in the ARC and PLC program. The ARC program offers income support when guaranteed revenues are not met for selected covered commodities. Under the ARC program, there's ARC County, which is the county level of loss coverage. And then there's ARC IC, which is an individual level loss coverage. So you can take all of your farms and just compare them to that instead of being under the county level. ARC County protects against crop revenue shortfalls, which is price and or production declines per covered commodity at the county level. ARC Individual protects against crop revenue shortfalls, price and or production declines across. This would be all covered commodities planted at the farm level across all farms enrolled in an ARC IC in the state. So we kind of consider that like a bucket concept. We put all your farms, all your planted acres in one deal just for the loss or gain. Price loss coverage provides an income support when the effective price of a covered commodity is below the effective price set by the statute of so a decline in production is not going to be covered under PLC. This is strictly going to be driven by the market. Just a little quick comparison here. PLC uses price plus PLC yield. We talk a lot about base acres. And just to let you know, to clarify, base acres were assigned to the farms, so they may not be a reflection of all of what's actually being planted on the farm. There are farms that have been planted for years that have 0 base acres, and then there's farms that aren't really in production that have base acres, but they were assigned with previous farm bills. But on the PLC, the payment's determined by individual covered commodity crop base acres. ARC County, we use the price plus the county level yield. And again, it's determined by the individual covered commodity crop. ARC IC uses price plus the producer's yield on the farms. So it's going to use all crops planted of the covered commodity combined with all the farms in the state. Payments on PLC is 85% of a specific crop base on a farm. ARC County is as well. ARC IC is 65%, but that is total base acres on a farm. PLC and ARC County, you do not have to turn in any yields or production. ARC IC, it is required each year to turn in your production, your yields. The planting of a covered commodity is not required for PLC and ARC County, but ARC IC, it is required. The exception to that would be is if a farm is 100% prevent plant, that's when it would pick up those acres. So in 19 and 20, when we did make an election and we were doing behind, that was actually a year that there was a lot of flooding. So people had that opportunity to know ahead of time. And we saw a lot, probably the biggest increase in ARC IC at that time. So on PLC and ARC County, you can elect by covered commodity. So you can mix like corn and soybeans could be ARC County, and then wheat and grain sorghum could be PLC. ARC IC, you're electing all covered commodities on the farm. ARC County and PLC are not eligible on that farm. So there's no mixture. You're putting it all in the ARC IC. ARC County and PLC producers are required to designate the shares and sign a contract for the farms enrolled. ARC IC, the producers sharing in the covered commodities on the farm enrolled are required to sign a contract. They do not have to declare the shares at that time because they will be determined by what they report to us as planted acres from the FSA 578. The 2024 ARC PLC began in December 18th because we were without a farm bill. Typically, we start as early as October most years. But this year it did not start until December 18th of 23, and the sign up ends March 15th of 2024. The enrollment will occur on a covered commodity by covered commodity base acre crop basis. If an election is not submitted by the deadline of March 15th, the election defaults to the current election for the crops on the farm from the prior year. To be eligible for payments, producers must annually enroll their respective share interest of a covered commodity base acres. Ben mentioned earlier that there was a multi-year option offered in this farm bill, and that is correct. You could elect that and not have to re-sign, but there are different things that can kick that multi-year out. So it's always best to stop and talk to your local county office to make sure all your farms are signed up by March 15th. Some of those elections could be a deceased producer. It could be a farm record change, an operator change. And if we had to recon a farm, those things all kick out the multi-year and could not be picked up again. And so then it would take signing a new contract each year. Here's a few important ARC PLC deadlines. March 15th, 2024 is the enrollment and election deadline. July 15th of 2024 is the deadline to report your planted acres. July 15th, 2024 is the deadline to report production. So your yields for ARC-IC for 2023 ARC-IC enrolled farms. And September 30th of 2024 would be the deadline to sign any contract revision, successions, and late files. Early October 2025, once the marketing year average price has been determined, if a payment triggers, that's when it would pay 2024's year. The marketing year average is different for each commodity. So for example, for like corn and soybeans, it runs from September 1 to August 30th. And so then that's complete typically by September of 2025. And that's what we would know the marketing year average to be for 2024. Why March 15th? We get this question a lot. People don't want to make the election by then. The reason we have to do this because it closely aligns with RMA's sale closing dates. They offer 3 options: the enhanced coverage option, the supplemental coverage option, and the stacked income protection plan for Upland Cotton. ECO, SCO, and STAX are all part of RMA programs, which we do not have any control over, but how you sign up with us can affect your availability for those farms. So ECO is not affected by enrollment in ARC PLC at all. To be eligible for SCO, producers cannot be in the ARC. So you would have to do PLC if you want to be eligible for SCO for a certain commodity. And to be eligible for STAX, the producer cannot enroll the seed cotton base acres at all. Sorry, that was a little quick run through and a very basic. Are there any questions at this time, or Ben, you wanting to save those for later?
Yeah, let's we're gonna go ahead and we'll just we'll start taking questions in that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question, feel free to put those down there. We'll get those just here momentarily. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We do appreciate that. I want to go through just a couple of decision ideas, or at least thoughts I have on making enrollments, and then we'll get to some discussion. But thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. So again, a reminder, everybody, if you want, you can put your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. I want to go through a couple of just general thoughts about enrolling in different programs. In some ways, this is overwhelming for producers. And again, it's not USDA or anybody's intention to overwhelm producers. They do a very good job. They do a wonderful job of rolling out programs on their time, on the timeline that often they're given. But I do tend to like to just showcase that if you take into account all the decisions based in the farm program bucket, Rebecca just talked about how sometimes you can be eligible for a program or not eligible based on what you select. If you take all those in the commodity program bucket, you take all the choices available to you under the crop insurance bucket, and then you take these high coverage policies, or what I call high coverage policies, SEO, ECO, margin protection. There's like 160 different combinations available for producers to analyze and look at. So it can be a little bit overwhelming. We here at the University of Missouri Extension are certainly willing to help talk through some things and at least give some thought to what you're doing. USDA does a wonderful job, but they can't tell people what to enroll in, and so it's a great partnership for us to work with them. I want to cover a couple of things that Rebecca just talked about. This idea of base acres is something that we hear a lot of. If you buy a new farm and it doesn't have base acres associated with that, does that impact the purchasing power of the land? Maybe, but really where it comes down to is the risk structure of that land as well. So I'm giving you an example here. Let's just assume this farm, this FSA farm number 12345, in 1996 looked a lot like this: 100 acres of trees for pasture with cows, 60 acres of corn. It would have potentially had been assigned 60 acres or 60 corn base acres, right? That same farm today in 2023 or 2024, now instead of being 180 acres of pasture, it now is in soybeans, right? And in fact, now it's 180 acres of soybeans and 60 acres of trees. We still have those 60 acres of trees. In this case, that farm still has 60 base acres of corn. There are some provisions. I'm kind of simplifying this a little bit, but I want to make the point here that like we haven't had a whole lot, we haven't had opportunities in a while to update acres to increase the number of acres, even if it's cropped. The second thing is whatever you plant, at least under Ark County, is based on what the base acre payment is. So even though you've planted soybeans, your payment would still be based on the corn marketing year or marketing prices and yields, even though you didn't grow corn on this particular farm. So and this is Ark County. Ark IC is a little different, but just kind of want to bring that forth for the base acre discussion. Part of the reason why this is important is when we look at base acres to planted acres. So those first two columns that you see there, in the United States, we had almost 53 million acres of base acres of soybeans, but we planted 87 million acres of soybeans. And so there was a lot of soybean acres that were under different crops. This kind of can have an impact in terms of how you think about your risk structure. You could imagine a scenario where you have something planted in grain sorghum, and your base acres are in grain sorghum, but you now plant soybeans. Well, maybe soybeans have a really rough year. Your soybeans don't yield very well, but grain sorghum had a pretty good year. You could end up in a scenario where you faced a loss on your soybeans, but you don't get an Ark County or PLC payment because your base acres are in sorghum, grain sorghum. So just want to make that point, that we do have a little bit of a mismatch between base acres and planted acres. As Rebecca mentioned, there are three options of programs available for producers. There's the price loss coverage program, and then the two agriculture risk coverage options. The county option is using county average yields. The individual option is using the yields on your farm or on your client's farm. Only for price loss coverage can you enroll in the supplemental coverage option that's provided by federal crop insurance. So if you want to use supplemental coverage option, you have to roll in price loss coverage for that program. Okay. The other thing, we've already talked about this a little bit. We had the poll question. This map is a little bit cluttered, so I do apologize. We're right here. We're in January, February of 2024, considering decisions for the 2024 crop year. As a reminder, the deadline is March 15th to enroll for producers and landowners that have risk. The growing season, when the crop for corn and soybeans gets planted, will be this summer. It'll get harvested next fall, but the final window for prices isn't set until August 31st of next year, of 2025. So again, like Rebecca mentioned, and then we did the poll question, October of 2025 is when a payment would be made for any type of downfall this year. Again, some farms, that's a risk. And timing, right? You're suffering the loss this year, but you're not going to get paid for a year and a half from now if a loss does occur. So just something to keep in mind. That if payments were triggered in Missouri this past October, and producers said, "Hey, I got a payment from Ark County or Ark County in 2023," that was actually from the 2022 crop. So there were some counties in Southwest Missouri that triggered payments in 2022 that would have got paid out this past October. So just kind of a timeline of when everything happens to make sure you understand cash flows as well. I want to mention the supplemental coverage option real quick. It is an area-based yield or revenue protection policy. It's sold through crop insurance. It is added coverage on top of whatever the underlying policy is. So if your client has so in this case, it's the gray bars. If your client or you have a crop insurance policy that's 70% coverage, SCO would add a 16% area-based policy on top of that, right? So it's whatever the difference is between your underlying coverage all the way up to 86%. Um, this is a 2021 example. I know it's a couple years old at this point, but it works well to explain this. So that's why I keep using Bates County as my home county. And so I tend to look at stuff for this. SCO, it's an area-based policy. It is cheaper. And so in some cases, you can get some added coverage at the area level for a relatively small amount. The thing that I try to discourage, again, this is something you'll want to talk with either your crop insurance agent about or call me or whatever, is in some cases I've had people say, well, why would I buy 80% crop insurance coverage and pay $17 an acre? It's going to be higher than that this year, or, it'll be higher than $17 an acre when I can buy a 70% coverage policy at $6.09 and add SEO coverage onto it, right? And you could do that, but you are adding more risk because you're basically taking your individual risk of your individual farm, now spreading it out over a county. It's the law of averages, right? You could have a down year and the county be relatively good. And you've added some risk to your operation. So that's SCO. When we talk about supplemental coverage option, that's what it is. It's adding an area-based coverage plan up to 86% on top of your underlying crop insurance policy. Couple of things to think about in regards to SEO. If planted acres on your farm are larger than your historical base acres, then SEO provides you a stronger revenue protection program because, as I mentioned earlier, right, SEO is based on planted acres, whereas your ARC County and PLC yields are based on base acres. And so if you've got, back to our example we had, if you've got 180 acres of planted soybeans, but you only have 60 base acres of corn, SEO actually provides you a little bit better protection than what ARC County would be because it's based on what you're actually growing and it can be paid on 100% of those acres rather than 85% of your 60 base acres. So that's just one example. I will say it does, decrease your individual coverage if you choose to buy down and then buy higher levels of SEO coverage. You're adding risk to your operation, so just keep that in mind. However, this year, even a 1% or 6% gain, so if you're an 80% crop insurance user, you can add 6% SEO to your insurance coverage. That's going to ensure about $49 more of revenue or protect $49 of additional revenue. And then just finally, when we think about stacking these policies, PLC plus SEO is a great risk management strategy because you kind of get the best of both worlds. However, I find a lot of producers just want the simplicity of either ARC County or PLC and not thinking about SEO. SEO has been relatively what's the word I'm looking for? We have not had great participation in SEO because I don't think we've done a good job talking about what it actually is. Similar ECO or the enhanced coverage option. Again, this is through your federal crop insurance agent or your crop insurance agent. It does a lot of the same things as SEO. It's adding area-based protection on top of your underlying policy. But now instead of just going up to 86%, you can go from 80 to 86 or 86 to 95 or 80 to 95%. In this policy, you do not have to be enrolled in PLC. You can actually elect this with ARC County as well. It provides a little bit more flexibility. It is expensive to buy. And I do encourage people to think about this in terms of two separate crop insurance programs or two separate policies, your underlying policy, and then yours, what I call high margin programs or high revenue programs, whatever you want to look at, those top end programs that we see. So a couple of thoughts about elections and enrollments in commodity programs for this year. This is an analysis I've been doing for about 4 years now, looking at can we find a simple way just to think about enrollment for 2024 programs. And the question I always ask is, can we use history to kind of give us any indication? And so I've come up with this very simple, indicator, if you will. All it is it's the current marketing year price for the current year divided by the effective reference price for the following year. So the example here I have is corn. The current price for our current marketing year, which was last year's crop, is $4.81. And the reference price for the 2024 crop is $4.01, right? And so if we divide those, that comes up to a ratio of 120%, or the current price is 20% higher than what the effective reference price is. Soybeans, we can do the same thing. Our soybean price relative to its effective reference price is 138%. So those are my examples, and let me show you why I think this works, right? So if I take all the crops and I take all the years that we have information for, this is just a chart of how this plays out. All those years and all those commodities, those 21 commodities over the last, what is that, 10 years, fit into these buckets, and you can see the distribution. And so I'm going to skip quickly over this slide to get to this slide. This now looks at and says, okay, based on that ratio, and I know I'm going through this quick, but I'll stop here in just a second so you can digest this. This ratio here is if the ratio was at those levels, how often does it trigger under PLC in the gray bars and Ark County under the yellow bars? Okay, so you can see that if the ratio is 80% or less, every scenario or every situation that's happened in the history of these programs, both Ark County and PLC have paid out when that ratio is under 80%. Okay, and then conversely, if the ratio is more than 130%, of the instances where a payment was made, it was heavily skewed to Ark County. Okay, so that's how we're looking at this, and I can break these out, and we can look at the average payment rates under these same ratio categories as well, right? And so there's a couple of things I want to point out. When the ratio is below, that same ratio I just showed you on the previous slide, when it's below 95%, PLC or both programs have a tendency to make or pay out about the same rate, right? Ark County and PLC both tend to pay out in this scenario. However, it is the PLC payments on a per acre basis that are a lot larger than the Ark County payments. So when that ratio is below 95%, that tends to support enrollment in PLC. If it's between 95 and 110, there's really not a clear indication. Both programs pay out roughly about the same amount over the same frequency. However, Ark County probably gets a little bit of the edge, even though it has a lower average payment rate, it's triggering out more frequently. And then finally, the Ark County payments pay out, or any ratio above 110 has a tendency to pay out for Ark County more so than PLC. So that's how I look at these, and I found it to be a pretty reasonable indicator of where things are going, and we'll talk about how that fits for this year's crops. But I also just want to point out that in that first category there of less than 95% of a ratio, PLC makes big payments, right? And that's because those Ark County those Ark County payments are capped at 10%, a band of 76 all the way up to 86%. PLC has a much larger cap, and so the payments can be a lot larger if they're triggered out. Okay, so I just wanted to make that comment in there as well, that when we get to lower yields, PLC tends to make a big payment. If we look at this year's ratio, so this is this year's ratios. The purple bars there are crops that favor Ark County enrollment. The blue bars are those toss-up categories like long grain rice, seed cotton. Those are commodities that probably, it's more of a toss-up, and we'll talk about where I think things will line up. But for the majority part, for corn, soybeans, wheat, grain, sorghum, barley, oats, Ark County is looking like a favorable option for producers this year. Peanuts is our only crop where there's a signal for PLC or towards PLC. Again, if you want to do the PLC or the SCO option for crop insurance, you have to be enrolled in PLC. Peanuts is the only one that's got a clear indicator there. Long grain rice and seed cotton probably will favor PLC, but they're more toss-ups as we look ahead. These are our forecasts. So Fabry every year puts out forecasts in terms of how marketing year prices are expected to look like for the year ahead. We use the same formula as FSA does to calculate where the expected payments might trigger. Again, similar to the chart before, the yellow bars here are PLC, the black bars are Ark County. Again, you see those large payments for peanuts, rice, and cotton for PLC, which is why I think even though cotton and rice in my prior analysis showed a little bit of a toss-up. Our expected payouts are certainly looking a little bit further towards the PLC. And then as you go down the spectrum, sunflower, sorghum, soybeans, and corn all tend to be favoring Ark County for 2024. So if you're making your decision just based on Ark and PLC and not taking into account SEO, this would be some analysis that that we anticipate for an expected payment rate per base acre in 2024. There are tools available. So the University of Illinois does great work to help put out tools. We have some tools here at Mizzou as well, but I just wanted to highlight Illinois because I think theirs is a really nice product. It is available at the website you see at the top of your screen, and I'll put it in the chat box. You basically can put in what county and what crop you're looking at, whether you've got irrigated or non-irrigated products, and then it spits out this distribution. So what I want to show you here is that for Bates County for 2024, they have an average yield of 125 bushels or 152 bushels to the acre, and a 2024 marketing year average price of 450. The intersection of that is 0. So let me make my next point. We do not anticipate very big payments, if payments at all, for 2024. If I go back to my previous slide, you'll see here that Ark County and PLC, Ark County is making a payment of $20 per acre on average for 2024. But I remind you that this is based on a simulation result, and so it'll be different than that. But it'll be, kind of the same relationship with PLC. If we're looking at just a stagnant analysis, we don't anticipate payments for 2024. However, you can use this as a lender to kind of look at risk exposure. So if yields drop all the way down to 137 bushels an acre for Bates County and price stays at 450, that would trigger a $15 per acre payment. Similar, if yields stay at 152, price would have to drop all the way down to $4 to trigger a payment, and it would be $21 per acre. So you can kind of look at this graphic, this distribution, to get an idea of when payments might start triggering under different yield and price scenarios. There is an ArcIC calculator and tool. I helped build this with the University of Illinois folks. We're not going to go through it because ArcIC is a little bit complicated. If you have questions about ArcIC, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to talk to anybody. But I will say that, as Rebecca mentioned, 100% prevent plant in 2019 helped people kind of, that was a big enrollment year for ArcIC. Now that we're enrolling early, so that year we were behind. We knew what yields were. We knew we had a lot of prevent plant when we were enrolling. We're not anticipating a lot of prevent plant here in March for the year ahead, right? So it's a little bit harder to choose ArcIC when you don't know what actually is happening. And it is a difficult program to think through and analyze. I want to give a plug for Texas A&M, another university we use, and the link's there, and you can find the link in the slides online. They have some decision aids for cotton, rice, and peanuts. We work with them, provide prices and analysis for their tools. And so if you have questions, if you're in the Boot Hill of Missouri dealing with cotton, rice, and peanuts, Texas A&M might be a viable source for you as you're working with clients. So we've talked through most of these before. I just want to, again, highlight the risk that exists. Even though this is a safety net program, not every planted acre has a federal commodity program attached to it because base acres do not equal planted acres. Similar, if you plant a field of soybeans, but your base acre is in corn, you're going to get a payment based on the corn fundamentals, not the soybean fundamentals, even though that's what you've planted under the Ark County program. ArcIC, does take into account what you planted. Timing of payments come in October after the marketing year is complete. So you've got a ways to go after suffering the loss in the summer. If you have a loss, you have to wait a full year before the marketing year is complete to get some financial assistance, at least in this program. It does not take into account costs. This has been a kind of an area of talking points over the last 2 years as input costs have rose so much. Ark and PLC don't help, they don't insure against very high input cost. They only do revenue or price. And so there's been a question about incorporating costs. These programs do not incorporate costs. It's just price and revenue. County averages might not be what actually triggers on a farm. So you could have a loss on your farm, and if the county has relatively good yields, you might have a loss on the farm, but the county does not trigger a payment. And then these programs do not cover long lasting or multiple years of low revenue or of low revenue, right? It's a moving benchmark. So if revenue declines, eventually the payments will stop coming if revenue stays low for a period of time, the program will stop paying out because those benchmark yields and revenue those lower yields and revenue would have come into the picture. So just some risks I want to highlight. We're going to end here. That's the end of my prepared remarks. So if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We've got a couple more polls, just 2 more polls to ask of the group before we turn to questions. The first one is, will every corn acre planted in 2024 be eligible for Ark County or PLC? We just talked about this, so I hope things work out well. All right, I think we're pretty close. I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Y'all did well. You got 100% no, they do not. They do not pay out, or not every acre is eligible because base acres and planted acres do not align. And then our final poll for today is, which program protects against only relatively low prices, price loss coverage, or agriculture risk coverage, supplemental coverage option, or enhanced coverage option. I'll give you just a few moments to answer this. Okay, I think we're just about there. The majority of you got it right. Price loss coverage is the only one of these 3 that really protects against relatively low prices. All the other 3 are revenue programs, so they take into account both yields and price. But very good job. That would be a passing grade in my farm management class. So you did really well. I'm gonna again remind you, if you have questions for Rebecca or I, you can put those in the Q&A feature at the bottom. We're gonna get to those here in just a second. If we don't get to all of them, we'll post them on the website. Do want to remind you about our next webinar in this series. So it's coming up on February 28th. My colleague Rohan Say and I will be joined by members of a different USDA agency. So we'll be joined by members of the Risk Management Agency, the agency in charge of administering federal crop insurance. We'll be joined on February 28th to talk about crop insurance decisions for 2024. So again, make sure to put that on your calendar. We hope you can join us on that day. And then also, just before you leave today, if you wouldn't mind filling out our evaluation, we really appreciate it. It helps us to give feedback to our presenters that joined us today, and thank them for their work that they did. So with that, on behalf of all my colleagues, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to end this PowerPoint. Oops, sorry, let me stop sharing screen. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A chat box, but does anybody have any questions? Feel free to put them in the thing and we'll try to answer them for 2024 federal crop programs. Well, seeing none, and we're getting up against time. If you have questions, you're welcome to email those to me at bpbrown@missouri.edu. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up, and we look forward to seeing you all on the 28th of February. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.